Hey everybody, this is C.L.S. All-in-One, and today I'm going to show you how to make a manual pad that's 4 foot wide by 8 foot long and 9 3/4 inches tall. And this can be used for skateboards, scooters, and even bikes. And I tried to keep this design as simple as possible so even beginners can try this. So for materials, you're going to need a 4 foot by 8 foot sheet of plywood that's at least 1/2 inch thick. And if you can afford it, you want to get a sheet that has a finished smooth surface on one side, but it's going to be quite a bit more expensive. You're also going to need 4 2x10s that are 8 foot long, a box of 3-inch wood screws, a box of 1 5/8 inch wood screws, and a box of 3/4 inch pan head screws. And for grinding, you'll need at least 1 stick of slotted angle steel that's 1.5 inches by 1.5 inches by 8 foot long, with a 14 gauge thickness. You can also purchase some wheels and handles, but they are not necessary. And I spent around $130 at Home Depot, but the prices will most definitely vary. Now keep in mind, you can make this box taller or shorter easily just by replacing the 2x10s with 2x6s to make it shorter, or you can use 2x12s to make it even taller. So for this video, I'm actually using a scrap piece of plywood, but for all the measurements in this video, it'll be based off of a 4 foot by 8 foot design, so no cuts will have to be made to the plywood when using a 4 foot by 8 foot sheet. So for the first cuts you want to make, you're going to want to cut 3 of the 2x10s at 93 inches. So you're going to measure 93 inches, make a mark, and cut it off at the 93 inch point. And for that last 2x10, you're going to want to make 2 cuts at 48 inches. Now I know these are supposed to be 8 feet long, but normally they're not exactly 8 feet. So that's why you want to make 2 separate marks at 48 inches, so you have 2 pieces the exact same length. And to mark your lumber, you can use a square so you have nice straight cuts, and I'm using a circular saw to make the cuts. So now I have 3 2x10s that are 93 inches long and 2 2x10s that are 48 inches long. So now I'm going to start assembling my lumber together, and if you can, you want to find a nice smooth surface, that way you can stand your lumber up and screw it together easily. So with all my pieces of lumber standing up like this, I want to go ahead and make a mark at 2 feet on that 4 foot piece, that way I can put that middle 2x10 right at the 2 foot mark. And now I'm going to use some 3-inch wood screws to secure the end of the 4 foot piece to the 93 inch piece. Now if you don't have a lot of experience with the drill, you may want to have an extra person out there helping you hold that lumber so you can get those screws in without having to hold the lumber at the same time, and you can also pre-drill the holes to make it even easier. And when using 2x10s, I like to use at least 3 screws to secure each piece. And now I'm screwing together that middle 2x10, and you want to make sure that's at that 2 foot mark. And when you're screwing all these pieces of lumber together, you want to try to keep these as square as possible, that way everything's nice and level. And after you get one side screwed together, you're just going to do the same exact thing on the opposite side. So at this point, we can kind of get a visual for how high this manual pad's going to be. And that's where I was saying you could use some 2x6s to make it a little bit shorter, or even 2x4s, or even 2x12s to make it even taller. Then once I get this all screwed together, I'll have a 4 foot by 8 foot frame that's ready for my 4 foot by 8 foot sheet of plywood. Now with this particular design, it's meant for grinding on the edges and jumping on the center of the box where that middle 2x10 is located. But if you want to make this even stronger so you can jump on all areas of the box, you can purchase one more 2x10 by 8 foot long and make 4 cuts at approximately 21 3/4 inches. But you want to make sure to measure this first before making those cuts, and secure these to the inside of the framing in a staggered pattern so they can be secured together easily. And this is not necessary. If you're able to send your jumps anywhere close to the middle of that pad, it should be plenty strong enough. But if you want more strength, go ahead and add these supports. So now it's time to place my 4 foot by 8 foot sheet of plywood on top of my platform, and if everything's done correctly, they should be the same exact size. So now you want to go ahead and square up that piece of plywood and get all those edges to line up correctly. And once that's done, we want to go ahead and make a mark at 2 foot down the center of the box. So you're going to make a couple different marks and then use a straight line to make a mark all the way down that box. And we're making this mark so we know where to secure the plywood to that middle 2x10. And now I'm going to use my 1 5/8 wood screws to secure the plywood to the framing, and I'm going to put a screw about every foot around the entire perimeter of the box, and then down the center of the box where we put that mark at 2 foot. And if you notice here, the edge of my plywood is damaged, but it doesn't matter because this is where my grinding edge is going to be located anyway. And when you're securing that plywood to the frame with the screws, you want to make sure to countersink those screws. What that means is you want to make sure the screw heads are below the surface of the plywood, because if they're sticking up, that creates a hazard. So make sure those screws are below the surface of the plywood. And the screws just barely need to be below the surface, maybe just a 1/16 of an inch, just enough to where it's below the surface. Now this step is completely optional, but what I did is I purchased some utility wheels at Home Depot, and what these will do is make that box easier to move around. And I'm securing these wheels to the outside edges of the box here, and I'm using 1.5-inch lag screws, and I'm mounting these to where the wheels are just barely not touching the ground. So what will happen is when I tip the box up, the wheels will touch the ground, and I'll be able to maneuver this box around pretty easily. So with these particular wheels, I was able to secure the top 2 lag bolts first, but to secure the bottom 2, I actually had to tip the box or pad up so I could access the 2 bottom holes to secure the bottom lag bolts. Then on the opposite side of the box, what you can do is install some utility handles, or you can just use a dolly, which is what we do. And when we're using a dolly, it makes things really easy. As long as we're on a flat surface, we can move back and forth with ease. So I'll show you a couple examples here. Here's my son, he's only 11 years old, and he can pick this box up no problem with that dolly, just barely tilt it back, and then pull it back to wherever he wants, and push it forward to wherever he wants. So he can do this no problem. And again, these wheels are not necessary, but it does make it a lot easier trying to move this thing around because it is kind of heavy. And now we're on to the last steps, and this is going to be for installing the grinding edges, and we're going to be using the slotted angle steel. And to secure this piece, I'm going to use some panhead screws that are about 3/4 of an inch long, and I'm only going to put the screws on the side of the box, and I'm going to put those about every 3 inches. You don't want to put these screws on the top because they're going to interfere with your grinding. You only want these screws on the side. Now if you're able to find 8-foot sticks, that's great because then you won't have to make any cuts, but it may be necessary to make some cuts, and to do that you're going to have to use your circular saw with a metal blade. And then you have to wear the proper eye protection and also make sure none of those sparks can hit anything flammable. And if you want to, you can actually outline the entire perimeter of the box with this angle steel, but keep in mind these are kind of expensive. The one 8-foot stick alone is about 35 bucks. Okay, everything's done now and I've got that grinding rail secured, and now let's give it a test and see what happens. And it works. And let's try this one more time. I'll try to hit it at a little bit different angle here. And it works no problem. Now let's try to jump out, and you want to remember when you're jumping, you want to try to land on the center of the box if you don't have those extra supports, but if you have those extra supports, you can land anywhere you want. Well, hopefully this gave you a good outline on how to make a manual pad, and you're off and running. And now it's time for me to go. Hey everyone, thanks for watching. This is C.L.S. All-in-One. If you want to hear more from me, please like and subscribe. And to see more of my videos, just click any of these categories to see more.